February 2005. Absolutely nothing going on in my life. No changes. So let's get to the books. And the first book that I read in February of 2005, let's double check this, Infernal Angel by Edward Lee. From Leisure, back in the day when Leisure was putting out, when Leisure Books existed and was putting out great stuff like this. This is the second in the Infernal series by Edward Lee, where hell is a city. It is a giant, horrifying, grotesque city. And in this story, there are two people who have the power to move from the real world, our world, the world we know, into hell. And they have, when they're in hell, I think just when they're in hell, they have amazing abilities. One of them wants to bring hell to earth. The other one wants to stop them. It's a great series of stories. Edward Lee wrote 4 or 5, I think. And Christine Morgan has carried on and written 2 Infernal books. I still only read one of them so far. I have the other one. It's right there. It's always looking at me. And there's an anthology of stories where a bunch of people wrote Edward Lee stuff, and I think they're all Infernal stories, but I haven't read it. I have a copy of it right over there. Haven't read it yet, so don't take my word for it. But anyway, the first book that I read in February of 2005 was Infernal Angel by Edward Lee. Fantastic book. Well worth checking out. After that, that's the only one that I have to show off. After that, I read Dead Until Dark by Charlaine Harris. This is the first in the Sookie Stackhouse series, the basis for the TV show True Blood, a show I have never seen. For those who don't know, Sookie Stackhouse is a waitress in Bontemps, Louisiana, and she can read minds. And this is a world where vampires are out. If I remember correctly, it is because someone invented a synthetic blood. And because of this synthetic blood, vampires now have a regular source of nourishment. So they don't have to, essentially, they don't have to be murderers. They don't have to kill people. They don't have to stalk people. They don't have to hide in the shadows. Now, because the synthetic blood is out there, vampires have outed themselves and exist in the world. So Sookie Stackhouse, she's working, she's reading minds. Then this guy comes along, and his name is Bill Compton. And she can't read his mind. Turns out he's a vampire, kind of a bad boy. And some other vampires are coming to Bontemps to look for him. And then there's some grisly murders. Is it Bill? Is it these other vampires? Why is Sookie dating a guy who could be a killer? You got to read the book to find out. It's enjoyable. I do know that I read at least 2 more in the series. Possibly more than that. But I've never seen the show. Didn't have whatever service it was on. And I hear it's enjoyable. But not a bad book. Dead Until Dark by Charlaine Harris. The first Sookie Stackhouse. I followed that up with CSI Grave Matters by Max Allan Collins. A novel based on the TV show. And in this, there's a young woman who keeps bugging the cops to look into the death of her mother. She thinks her stepfather had something to do with it. Thinks there was foul play. And but when they exhume her corpse, it's not even her. What are the CSI people going to do? They're going to solve the mystery, of course. Half the team is looking into that. Half the team is looking into possible murders at a nursing home. I think it is. If you like CSI TV show, you're going to enjoy these books. Max Allan Collins is a good writer. Some might say a great writer. Which is the reason I was reading these books, is because he was the author. CSI Grave Matters by Max Allan Collins. Then we have The Long Ride Back by Ed Gorman. This is a collection of Western short stories, 16 stories to be precise. And it's interesting to me that I have Max Allan Collins and Ed Gorman one right after the other, because it was while reading a Max Allan Collins comic book that I discovered Ed Gorman. If I remember correctly, it was Ms. Tree Quarterly, and there was a backup story, Ms. Tree, created by Max Allan Collins, and it had a backup story that was written by Ed Gorman. And I was like, hey, I got to check this guy out. That's how I remember it happening. So Max Allan Collins and Ed Gorman always mixed together in my head. But The Long Ride Back, Ed Gorman, great writer of mysteries, great writer of westerns. So you've got 16 short stories. At least one of them is a Spur award-winning story, I believe. And not always a happy ending in his stories. So if you want to try out some Ed Gorman, get a flavor of his westerns, this isn't a bad place to start, because you got 16 little stories to whet your appetite. The Long Ride Back, Ed Gorman. Then we have A Hunger Like Fire by Greg Stolze. That's what I'm going with. This is the first in a trilogy of books based on Vampire the Requiem from White Wolf Publishing. So, Vampire the Requiem was the role-playing game follow-up to the smash hit game Vampire the Masquerade. In Vampire the Masquerade, you chose a vampire clan that you were going to play. There were 12 or 13 clans, each with distinct characteristics. And that, it's weird that, well, maybe it's not weird. I'm not an expert on role-playing games, but White Wolf's role-playing games all sort of came to conclusions and were revamped. No pun intended. You know what? Pun intended. So Vampire the Masquerade sort of came to a close and became Vampire the Requiem. And whereas there were, as I said, 12 or 13 vampire clans in the Masquerade, I think there's only like 5 or 6 clans in Requiem. Anyway, so it's in this world, there are clans of vampires living in secret amongst humans, and there's lots of politics going on between these clans and such. But in this particular book, A Hunger Like Fire, our main character is Persephone Moore. She is a vampire dealing with vampire politics and living in the real world. And then there's this guy, I didn't write his name down, he's just a human alcoholic. He's got issues. He's going to come in contact with Persephone, and they're going to have to deal with something going on. And as I said, it's the first book in a trilogy. I generally enjoy the vampire stuff from White Wolf Publishing, but I don't recall my feelings about Requiem versus The Masquerade. I really liked The Masquerade. There was a lot of source material and a lot of books, so I was able to get into the different clans and the different personalities and things, whereas Requiem, I don't know that it went that far. But anyway, that is A Hunger Like Fire by Greg Stolze. I jumped ahead. Very far ahead. Because next up is City of Pearl by Karen Travis. And this is the second book. No, this is not. My notes are all confused over here. City of Pearl by Karen Travis is a standalone, as far as I know, science fiction book. Karen Travis I knew from her Star Wars stuff, and I know I mentioned her before and how I wasn't really thrilled with her writing and didn't think I'd read much of her other stuff. For some reason, I decided to read one of her original novels, City of Pearl, and we have Kavanaugh's Star. There are 3 alien races living in harmony on Kavanaugh's Star, and of course humans are going to come along and fuck it up. Uh, and Kavanaugh Star has this guardian called Eris that is a planet on its own. Um, but it has and will destroy all alien life to keep the balance on Kavanaugh's star, the natural balance on Kavanaugh's star. And of course, as I said, humans are going to come along, mess things up, possibly get everybody killed. I really don't remember much about this. And I don't recall if the writing in this was, in my opinion, any better or worse than her writing in Star Wars stuff. But if you're interested in alien races and humans messing things up for everybody, City of Pearl by Karen Travis. Then we have Hex and the City by Simon R. Green. This is a Nightside book. Our main character is John Taylor, who's a private investigator, and he has the special talent in that he is able to find anything. And in this book, he has been hired by Lady Luck to find the origin of the Nightside. And as he's investigating, he is perhaps going to find out about his mysterious mother, his mum, as it says in the description. But that could be bad. I really enjoy these books. Simon R. Green's writing is really, really good, and he has great characters. And sometimes in these urban fantasy, in this urban fantasy series, I think it has some excuse me, can sometimes have scenes that are quite scary versus other urban fantasy series that I have read. So this is another series that I would like to reread the ones I've read and then continue on with the ones that I haven't read, because I have not read the whole series. But it's Hex in the City by Simon R. Green. Excuse me. Then we have The Forgotten Man by Robert Crace. This is an Elvis Cole, Joe Pike novel mystery. And we have an old man who has been gunned down, and his final words to the cop that has found him in this dirty alley is that he is the father of Elvis Cole. Elvis Cole has been searching for his father-ish for most of his life. And now, is this guy really his father? Elvis Cole's going to investigate. He's going to open up old wounds. And maybe there are people that don't want him opening up old wounds. I really enjoy the Elvis Cole novels. Not as much as, say, the Spencer books by Robert B. Parker, but they're up there. And this is one of those. Every once in a while, when you have a series like this, I think eventually you're going to get a book that starts digging into the past of the character. And this is the one for Elvis Cole. And but very enjoyable stuff. Elvis Cole is a great private detective character. Joe Pike is the Hawk to Elvis Cole's Spencer. But distinct. Just there are enough similarities. He's the sort of sidekick, although he's an official partner in the private detective business, I believe, whereas Hawk is just a friend of Spencer's that helps out every once in a while. But anyway, The Forgotten Man, Robert Crace, a great Elvis Cole mystery. Then we have The Good, the Bad, and the Undead by Kim Harrison. Here is where we have the second book in a series. This is the Hollow series, and our main character is Rachel Morgan. She is a bounty hunter in a world of vampires, werewolves, magic, creatures, etc. This is urban fantasy, and in this story, just deal with vampires. And I thought I would remember everything else that I read about it, but I don't. I think there's a serial killer on the loose in Cincinnati, which is where these books take place. When I talked about the first book, in this series, reading it, I said that I didn't think I had read any more, but apparently I did. I read at least the second one. Apparently I was on an urban fantasy kick in 2005. Let's see if it continues as we go through this long running series of reading Remembrances. But The Good, the Bad, and the Undead, Kim Harrison, typical urban fantasy. Rachel Morgan, a bounty hunter in a world of magic and horror. After that, we have Department 30 by David Kent. And this is just a thriller. It's your typical thriller. Our main character is Ryan Elder. Years and years and years ago, his parents died in a double suicide. But then he receives a letter with a phone number and Department 30. And so he starts looking into it. Maybe his parents didn't die of a double suicide. Maybe there are government secrets and terrorism and that sort of thing. I think this is your typical political thriller where someone gets pulled into events much, much bigger than themselves and has to not only survive, but figure out what the hell's going on. I don't really remember much about it. Whether or not I enjoyed it, generally I like this type of book. But of course, it always depends on the writer, how well they do. But if it's your kind of thing, maybe check it out. Department 30 by David Kent. And then the final book that I read in February of 2005 was Buffy the Vampire Slayer / Angel Heat by Nancy Holder. And, okay, so in the first season of Angel, I believe it was the first season, there was an episode with these women who would get really hot when they got emotional or turned on. I don't know, but they could burn people up. And all I really remember is it Bailing? Is that the name of the actress that played the head woman, the one that Angel had to deal with? And they're from another dimension, and they were hiding out in a health spa. That's basically all I remember. It's not one of my favorite episodes. The reason I bring it up is because that main character lady, played by Bailing or Bailing, I think, don't remember exactly, she's back. She's searching for this woman who could unleash a war. So she's back in LA. Angel and Gunn and Angel's group, they're going to have to deal with her, figure out what's going on. And it has to do with the Terracotta Army, which is on display in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, Buffy is dealing with all her shit. It's the last season of Buffy. So she's a high school counselor, guidance counselor, and Spike is crazy with a soul. All sorts of stuff going on. And the museum exhibit with the Terracotta Warriors is going to be in Los Angeles and Sunnydale, which is what's going to bring Buffy and Angel together in the story, because this young woman that the woman from the old episode of Angel is looking for can somehow unleash the Terracotta Army, which will open up a gateway to hell to unleash more. I don't know, it's a bunch of stuff. Nancy Holder, generally a fine writer, except for her endings. I don't recall how the ending of this one is. I'm a fan of the last season of Buffy. So if she's very good, I think, at capturing the characters. So it's probably pretty good. I really don't remember. And if anything, it might have a poor ending. But that's Buffy the Vampire Slayer / Angel Heat by Nancy Holder. And that is everything that I read in February of 2005. I can't believe I forgot to say that Department 30 was the penultimate book. I think I forgot to say that. Penultimate book that I read in February of 2005. If I didn't forget it, now I've said it twice. So, question for this video: is something. When it comes to trying out a new author, do you prefer to jump right in with a full-length novel, or do you like to pick up a short story collection and get a taste for what they can do? Is it not something you think of? Is it a stupid question? Let me know what you think about all of this. For me, I've discovered a lot of authors through anthologies. So I've read a short story that I really, really liked, and then I've looked that author up and picked up more of their work. I don't know that I've ever purposefully picked up a short story collection from a single author just to get a taste of their work. Typically, it's either I've read something of theirs in an anthology or a magazine or something, and then picked up their novels or short story collections, whatever it might be, that I can find. Or someone's recommended somebody, or I've just picked it up based on the cover or the look of the book or whatever, and then eventually find their short story collections. An example, Brian Keene. I'd never heard of the guy. The Rising came out from Leisure Books. The day it came out, I bought it. After I read it, I went to his website, and the very next thing I bought from him was a short story collection. He didn't have a lot out at the time, and so that's what I grabbed. So I had read The Rising, and then Fear of Gravity, I think is what it's called. Maybe, I don't know. It's over there. But I had read the novel first. Stephen King, I read short stories first, but that was on somebody's recommendation. Although it turns out, I've talked about this, I had actually read a Stephen King short story in a Scholastic Reader thing, not knowing it was Stephen King. But when I wanted to read Stephen King, I went to the neighbor across the street. I knew he was a fan. I said, "Hey, can I borrow Stephen King? What do you recommend?" He's like, "Start with this short story collection." And it was either Skeleton Crew or Night Shift. I don't remember which one. The one that doesn't have the mist. But, so that's what, it was the short stories that really turned me on to Stephen King. So I guess I don't really have an answer myself for this question. I pick up books based on recommendations. I pick up books based on if they look interesting, if they sound interesting. But I have picked up books because I read short stories by the author that I liked, but that was in an anthology or magazine, not that author's own short story collection, if that makes sense. I'm trying to think if there's anybody aside from that Stephen King that was recommended to me where I started with a short story collection. It's possible, and I just can't think of it. But what about you? Let me know. Basically, thoughts on short stories, finding new authors. Let me know in the comments below. If you have any comments, questions, corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Post spoiler warning. We try to be polite here on my channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, I'll have links for my Instagram and Bluesky in the description below. And that's all I've got for you this week. So until next week, read more books.